Hello, welcome to AP Macroeconomics. This is going to be a class over some introductory concepts, actually some more introductory concepts, because last time we actually started talking about a few what I would consider introductory concepts from macroeconomics, or actually economics in general. So just to review those things that we talked about, we defined economics kind of simply as the study of human decision making and incentives. And importantly, not the study of money, although we will talk a lot about money and how we make decisions about money. We also talked about positive versus normative economics, basically positive economics being just statements of economic theory versus normative economics, which are somehow an opinionated statement, something that we should do because of this, or we shouldn't do that because of this or that. And then we ended that lesson with TINSTAFL, the acronym that's commonly used. That stands for there is no such thing as a free lunch. And with that, you should basically just take away the idea of nothing is free. There's a cost to everything. That cost may be time or effort. It may be money. But everything does have a cost, and if it seems like it's free, that's simply because we haven't tracked down exactly who ended up contributing some resources to that thing, right? And if we can't accept the idea that everything has a cost, then we can't really begin to talk about people's incentives for paying those costs. So let's go ahead and get started on what we're going to do today, which is more introductory concepts, okay? And really we're going to start off here on my themed Prezi by kind of talking about the fact that we've got a long road ahead of us. And these concepts today actually seem a little bit out of sorts. There's not really a unifying theme. It's kind of just a blast of a few different ideas that all ultimately underpin everything we're going to talk about as far as economics. So unlike what will usually be the case in this class, these concepts don't necessarily have a unifying theme. They're not linear. They may feel a little all over the place, and that's because there's certain things we just have to know, certain assumptions we just have to make in order to start to have economic conversations. So you just need to know these things. And so we've got kind of the road ahead of us here, and at the end of the road, ultimately, we're going to have the AP exam. So that's where we're headed. But first, just flying all over the place here, we need to start talking about some concepts. So the three economic questions, this is a concept that is going to be in every textbook here, and this is essentially the three questions that every nation or society must answer. What goods and services are going to be produced, how they're going to be produced, and for whom are they going to be produced. And let me get my screen out of the way there. Okay, so every society has to answer that. In our society, in a free market economy, what goods and services are to be produced is decided by individuals. We let the markets decide. Okay, businesses open because they think that they can be profitable providing certain goods and services. The possibility exists that in other societies, the government does. Think of a communist society, where the government would actually make the decisions of what will be produced. Hey, we need to have a certain amount of crops. So X amount of acres, that will be dedicated towards growing wheat, X amount of acres towards potatoes, etc., etc. We don't do that. The markets decide, individuals decide. How are they going to be produced? Well, once again, this is something we let the markets decide. We actually answer this question by saying we will set up the conditions for free enterprise and business to produce how they want. And then for whom are goods and services produced, we basically use the money system. Okay? If you pay for it, then you can have it. It ends up being based on who is willing and able to pay for things. That is generally for whom things get produced. But we also have a lot of laws and regulations and things that allow people to get things based on need. Think of handicapped parking spots. There's a limited amount of parking, and what we normally use for parking is first come, first serve. First one there, you get the spot. Well, we also recognize that there is a need for people who have some sort of disability or something hindering their ability to be mobile, that they should get a close spot, even if they don't get there first. And so we have certain systems in place where we have needs-based things. Again, see, I use an example here that doesn't have to do with money, but it is economics, okay? Who gets a parking spot? Well, first come, first serve, unless we've stepped in and decided there's going to be another way to do that, like handicap placards. So these questions here, they're just fundamental questions that every society asks, and you are responsible for knowing these, but they are actually quite straightforward. So we'll go ahead and move on from here. Now this idea, the word scarcity here, is really why economics exists in the first place. Scarcity is the fact that there is not anything out there that is unlimited. Okay? Everything is limited. Time is limited. You only have a certain number of minutes and hours in the day, right? Land is limited. There's only a certain amount of acreage. Water is limited. Some people know about that. It affects, look at California. They're having a huge issue with the water supply, right? Clean air is limited. Money is limited. But I don't even think that's a very good example. Because we could honestly just print more of that if we wanted to, right? And we'll understand the effects of that. But everything that you could possibly think of has a limit. Nothing is unlimited. And I say that, but there's actually one thing that economists commonly would suggest is unlimited. And the one thing that's unlimited is human wants and needs. So we have limited resources, but unlimited wants and needs. That is the statement that really defines the purpose for economics. And so I'll say it one more time. We have limited resources, but unlimited wants and needs. So if that wasn't true, then everybody could have everything they want. But the fact of the matter is that everybody can't have everything they want because everything is scarce. Okay? Everything is scarce. Now, it may seem like there's so much of it that you could never reach the end, but that doesn't make it any less scarce. Scarcity just says it has a limit. There is a limited amount of salt water in the oceans. Could we possibly ever use it all up? I don't believe we could. However, that doesn't change the fact that it's scarce. So that brings us to our next point here, that we've got to understand the difference between scarcity and a shortage. Because a shortage is something that we make, or we have, or we bring to markets. And if we have a shortage of it, it just means that we haven't brought enough to market. We haven't purchased enough and brought them to sell, or we haven't produced enough to bring to meet the demand that we have. So more people want it than people have brought it. But that's fundamentally different than scarcity, because scarcity means, listen, there's just a limit. There's a point where we won't have any more. You can have a shortage of something and be able to make a lot more of it. You just didn't. Maybe it wasn't profitable. We have the ability to make as many, pizzas as we probably could possibly want. And if you're in a certain market where there's just not a pizzeria, there might be a shortage of pizzas. But that doesn't mean that pizza is scarce. It just means that there's more people there that demand it than there are people there supplying it. So we really don't want to confuse these two things. Scarcity is just the fundamental assertion that everything has its limits. But a shortage has to do with an individual market and how many people are demanding a thing and how many people are actually supplying that thing. So we're going to talk about shortages more in the future when we examine supply and demand. So we're going on now to our next topic, which seems to kind of not have much to do with anything, but they kind of all do, and you might be able to tease out a common thread here. But this list of things, land, labor, capital, and entrepreneurship, these are known as the factors of production. They're also known as the economic resources. So if you hear or see me talking about, or you talk about resources in economics, we're talking about land, labor, capital, and entrepreneurship. We're not talking about anything else. In fact, what's not here, down at the bottom of the screen, you can see that what's not here, conspicuously missing from this list, is money. Money is not an economic resource. And when you start trying to use money as a resource, you run into problems like inflation, and we'll talk about that later. But money's not a resource. What is a resource is something that actually leads to production. So let's go through this list quickly and talk about what these are, because economists use these terms differently than most people do. So starting with land. Land is any natural resource. Land is land, of course, but land is also water. Land is air. Land is anything that exists naturally in nature and can be used in the production of something, which frankly is anything. Just depends on how creative we are. So oil is land. Oil is one of the probably the most influential land resources we have. The next resource is labor. And labor is human efforts at producing something. Human effort towards production. So if I do something like I'm doing right now, I'm putting effort into making this awesome video for you. This is me doing labor because I am producing something. I'm producing educational services at the moment. It could be paid or unpaid, but it has to be in the production of something. Okay? So labor is human effort at producing something. So what if human effort, labor, is applied to land? So I get hired by somebody to dig a hole in the earth until I uncover some iron ore. So I now have applied labor, right? Myself, digging a hole, digging a mine. And I have discovered land, which is iron ore. It hasn't been manipulated by people at all. Now, what do I have? I have a mine. I have an iron ore mine. And that mine is capital. So capital is anything that was created by people doing labor. And now we have this thing that can be used to make stuff. In this case, my mine, which is capital, is going to create, it's going to uncover iron ore. Which, by the way, iron ore itself is still land until it gets smelted. More labor gets applied. We smelt it. We turn it into something like steel, which is then a form of capital. Now, the key with capital is it is not made for final human consumption. It is something that is created by people, but it's not done yet. No one wants to buy the mine for the mine. People would buy the mine because they can have the potential of getting iron ore out of it. No one wants to buy steel just to have steel. You want to buy steel so you can make car frames or buildings or something else out of it. Those are capital goods. And finally, whoever had the bright idea of hiring me and putting me to work digging that mine and all the ideas of how to smelt the iron ore and blah, 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 that was an entrepreneur. And entrepreneurship is kind of a hard thing to pin down because it's not a tangible thing. Entrepreneurship is just ideas and initiative. Innovation and initiative. Somebody taking the risk and having the idea to say, that's a good idea. I can produce something. Here's how we're going to do it. I'm an entrepreneur, a small business owner. Okay? So entrepreneurs apply the other factors of production towards the production process. Okay? So land, labor, capital, entrepreneurship, you've got to know them and you've got to recognize them as both the factors of production and or economic resources. Finally, there is this idea of opportunity cost. And opportunity cost is defined as the value of the next best alternative that must be given up when a choice is made. So opportunity cost of maybe going out to eat with your friends or studying, if you chose to study, then the opportunity cost was the ability to go out with your friends and eat. Notice the cost isn't a dollar cost. It doesn't have to be a dollar cost at all, and oftentimes it's not. Often the opportunity cost is what did I give up? If I spent time doing this, what did I not have time to do? Whatever I thought was the best other use of my time, that was the opportunity cost. And it is subjective. My opportunity cost for doing something might be much different than someone else's opportunity cost. And here's the thing. To an economist, opportunity cost is the real cost of doing something. So we're going to run out of time here, but I want to just cover marginal thinking real quick. And marginal thinking is just thinking about an incremental change. So what is the impact of going from having, one marker to having two markers? Right? Maybe I get some sort of marginal benefit. What was the change that happened the incremental change. That's what marginal thinking is, and we'll talk a lot more. Okay, so that's marginal thinking. And let's just go ahead and finish this whole thing up now that we get that marginal thinking is incremental thinking. And we're actually gonna talk more about that moving forward. So if you didn't quite understand that explanation of marginal thinking, or marginal as a term in general, just try to replace marginal with incremental and you're generally okay. But we're going to have a lot more discussions on that. So the next thing is two economic assumptions that we always make. These just are assumptions that underlie everything that we talk about. The first one is ceteris paribus. And that is just Latin for other things being equal. And what that means is basically we're going to be dealing with complex models, and we're thinking about the entire economy. And obviously, multiple things, many things are all changing all at once in the economy. But in order to study it, we need to isolate variables, right? And so what would happen if the only thing that happened was people changed their mind about a product? All other things being equal, what would happen if people changed their mind about a product? We understand that at the same time people are changing their mind about a product, producers are producing more or less of the product, a competitive product might come onto the market. All of these things happen at once. The world isn't happening in a vacuum. But in order to study it and to generate the theories and generate the models that we're going to be using in economics, we have to hold everything else equal. We won't be able to analyze the change if we can't really feel like the change we're looking at is a result of only the one thing changing. So ceteris paribus means other things being equal. And then our other economic assumption is that people are rational. And what people being rational means is that they're going to act in their own self-interest. And the main thing I want you to understand here is that this is different than selfishness. You might do something because it's what you think is right, and what you got out of that was the satisfaction of believing you did what you thought was right. That would probably by nobody's stretch mean you were selfish, but you still did it out of a sense of self-interest. You were interested in doing the right thing. So obviously someone who does something purely for the financial or material gain of something is acting in their own material self-interest. However, that doesn't mean that someone who does something which is seemingly nice and helpful to others is completely unself-interested. It just means we're looking at a different set of incentives. Remember, this isn't a study of money. This is a study of human decision-making. And rational people have an incentive for doing everything they do. Quite literally, if you do something that is irrational, meaning you are doing something against your own self-interest, that is when you would be said to have some sort of a mental illness. So don't confuse the fact that there is a motivation behind the actions that people take, even those actions that are considered noble, with the idea that, oh, well, Mr. Snobby just said everybody's selfish. There's a big difference there, and we've got to move past wanting to just think about things in terms of being selfish. It's just simply, let's trace the actual incentives. Because if we can figure out what incentivized somebody to do something, well, then maybe we could encourage more of that behavior. And that is all for now. Okay, that is all for today. Please take a look at the video I have posted today. It does a pretty nice wrap-up. And as always, if you have any questions, bring them with you to class and we'll talk about them further. So thanks for logging in here today. I hope you got your notes. Always remember, and I probably should have said this at the beginning, that you're welcome to pause the video, replay it. Hopefully that's going to be the real benefit of this as a tool, that you're able to kind of go through this at your own pace. So thanks again, and I'll see you next time.